Hello, and welcome back to another Elevation Association Experience podcast. We are your hosts, Dr. Jared Hill, Dr. Dan Nelson. It's good to have you guys listening. Uh, we've actually been gone for a hot minute. We haven't podcasted in the last couple of weeks just due to the schedule and how crazy things are. So it's nice to be back in I don't know, we call it a studio. I don't know if it's a studio. Back in the office recording again.
The war room.
The war room. We'll call it the war room. Yeah. So, Jared, this is one that I've been wanting to do for a while, and I think it's a hot topic. And I think it's really a gray area for most docs where they this is a spot where they really want answers, but really don't know how to get them and where to go about it. This is where you see a lot of outreach to, your um I don't know, the supplier consultants, which we don't recommend. Sorry, supplier consultants, but you don't know this stuff. And what it is how do you know if you're ready for an associate?
Yeah, it's just one of the decisions that a lot of dentists make emotionally. They feel like they're busy or they're burned out or the hygiene schedule is slammed, whatever. And everyone will tell you you're ready, you need an associate. And maybe you are, maybe you're not, but how do you know when you're actually ready? Or when you're about to light your office on fire, right? So we'll go through today's a pretty awesome podcast. We've got there's really three reasons I think why dentists will look for an associate. Like I said, that you're too busy, right? You're running around with your head cut off. You're in the hygiene schedule. You feel like you're just being pulled in every direction, right? So that's almost like your practice is ready to go, or you feel like it's ready to grow, but you're at this bottleneck stage. The second reason I think is a lot of people want a different lifestyle. Like they're just like, look, I want fewer clinical days. I need someone to come in and share the load, or I'm ready to cut back a little bit, or whatever that looks like to you. And then the third one I think is more like a growth or either a growth strategy, or I would say maybe an exit strategy as well. So if you're looking to get out of the game, retire, you want to bring in a future partner, buyout. This is another reason why people look to bring on an associate. So you could be feeling any one of those three things, but before you're ready to pull the trigger, before you're ready to hire somebody, I think there's three areas that we want to look at. And the podcast today, and this is such a broad. There's so much. I should say there's so much information associated with this topic that we're actually going to divide it up into three separate podcasts.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. There's too much to cover. Yeah. So the three areas, really what we've done is we've created a readiness checklist, right? So we want to make this as simple as possible for anyone listening to go through and be able to look at it and say, okay, am I really ready for an associate? So is there enough demand? And that's not just based on patient numbers. So we're going to go all through all this stuff. We are going to go through all the data points, the KPIs, and look and say, okay, where do you need to be to know that you're ready? Do you have the systems to absorb another doctor? If you're not structured and optimized, you're just going to open up a bag of worms. You may have the demand, but if you don't have the systems, you're just going to be beating your head against a wall because there's so much more administrative duties that come with bringing on an associate. Just adding one more doc adds an entire you have there's a whole lot more that has to come with that additional doc, right? And then are you psychologically ready to share control? And this is something where we're going to get into this to help you to be able to assess, like, can I share? We're going back to preschool to, like, can you share? So we'll hit that, and those are the three parts we're going to break those up to: is demand, systems, and are you psychologically ready? So today we're going to focus on the demand and data aspect.
yeah, because if honestly, if the numbers don't support it, just before you even consider the other systems or your psychological readiness, if the numbers don't support it, the associate's going to feel like an expense, not a growth engine. You're
Yeah.
going to be pouring money into this thing, and you're going to build up resentment, and the associate's going to build up resentment. Your team is going to struggle as well because they're going to feel that struggle between Yeah, so the very first thing is to look at the numbers, and obviously let's start with the easy ones, right? How about a minimum patient base number? Like generally, there's some general rules of thumbs. Of course, these vary from where you live and if you're rural practice versus urban practice, but there's some general rules of thumb for a solo general practitioner,
Yeah,
right?
this is oh, sorry, go ahead, Jared.
Oh, I was just gonna say that this is also dependent upon what type of practice you run, right? So if you're heavy Medicaid, or if you're heavy insurance driven, or if you're not, for fee for service, or for somewhere in between, this number can vary, right? So this is a general rule of thumb, but one full time doctor typically is about 1,500 patients, 1,500 to 2,000 maybe if you're a heavy Medicaid or insurance practice, right? And that's patients that have been seen in the last 18 months.
Yeah, because those are considered active patients, right? Within 18 months, you consider those as an active patient base. You do have to take in mind that if you have a highly transient office, or you see a lot of them, if you do a lot of emergency services, that number is going to have to be higher. So there is, like Jared was saying, there's a lot of factors that go into that, but you can general rule, and I think that this is the data set that most of the supplier consultants focus on, and they'll be able to get you these numbers and say, okay, yeah, this is where this is. But there's a lot of information that they don't have that becomes critical. But this is the baseline. Like if you want to know really quick, like if you're not hitting, if you can't, if you're not in the 2,500 to 3,000 patient active patient world, then you're not ready. You can't comfortably add an associate. But also, you'll know if you're in that 2,500, 3,000. For those of us that have worked a schedule, when Jared goes out of town, when I go out of town, Jared did it before I got here, working a patient base of 3,500. When I first came on, Jared was doing that by himself, and I'll let you speak to that, Jared, but you can feel the squeeze and it's hard and you have to add, we'll get into it a little bit, but when you're supporting that many patients, guess what? You don't have one or two hygienists either. You've got more hygienists in the office before the associate gets there. So there's going to be period of time that it's kind of hard and it's uncomfortable.
Yeah, and you have to go through that. You can't be like, "Oh, I'm at a comfortable place right now. I don't want to associate." You almost have to build it up a little, so it's almost bursting at the seams in order to bring on an associate. And this is, there's lots of different ways to bring on associates as well. Do you bring on an associate a day a week? Do you bring on an associate 2 days a week? All that depends on your goal and your long-term vision and what your plan for growth plan is for the practice. So we're just assuming that you want to bring on a full-time associate. And then so in order to bring on a full-time associate, you're looking at 2,500, like Dan said, 20 to 3,000, you know, maybe a little less if you have a very strong new patient flow, right? If you got all these new patients coming in, your practice is hot. It's people are coming all the time. Maybe you can get away with a few less, but not very many. If you have 1,500 patients, I'll say this, or flat new patient rate, you don't have enough. You don't have enough to support two doctors at that point in time. So, that's just a general broad, and there's quite a bit of variance in those numbers. That's, between
Mhm.
500 to 1,000 variance in numbers. So please take that into consideration. That should just be just a very first marker of where am I at? Let me take this into consideration, and then we can dive into some of these other numbers as well.
Well, I think that those numbers too is there are some outlier situations that can be considered. If you are transitioning yourself into a more specialized role, all right. So we have a we have a friend down in Utah who ran a general practice for years, and very successful general practice, but he was starting to get burnt out. He came to us. We've talked about him before. He came to us and said, "I'd like to shrink down to 2 to 3 days a week." And we said, "Sure." And so he did. He shrunk it down to 3 days a week, where he was just seeing patients 3 days a week. Well, there was a wisdom tooth extraction practice that their primary doc he got sick or had an injury or something where he couldn't see patients. And so they reached out to this doc who was very competent. He was Air Force trained and was really good with thirds. And they said, "Can you step in and help out?" He did, thinking he's just going to do it as a temporary gig and yeah, just help these dudes out. Well, he ended up falling in love with that again, and the burnout went away. And so he's like, we talked to him, and now he's working 5 days a week, and we're like, dude, how did you end up at 5 days a week when you were trying to cut it down to 2.5, 3? And he's like, "Oh, I'm freaking loving it." And so if you look at that situation, he there was a point where he was like, maybe I want an associate to run the general practice now, and I just want to focus on wisdom teeth. I don't want to be doing general practice anymore. That's a situation where you could probably shift and look at those numbers a little bit differently. But as a general rule of thumb, the numbers that we've thrown out, the numbers that we've just given you, are the ones that you want to base that off of. And like I was saying earlier, when you get to that point, you don't want to put the cart in front of the horse unless you have such a giant stockpile of money that you can sit and chill and let the associate take all the work. You need to have your hygienist in place prior to hiring an associate. And the reason for that is you have to build up the workload. You can do it the other way around. Like I said, if you're okay taking a huge pay cut for a couple months while you build that up, but you run the risk of not finding a hygienist, bringing an associate on, and then both of you starve. So you have to be careful with that. So you have to look at your hygiene capacity and the number of your hygienists, right? So we know that in a traditional, generalized practice, that hygiene is the engine that feeds the docs. So here's some rough capacity rules for that. So one full-time hygienist, right? So let's say 4 days a week, 8 patients a day will support about 1,000 to 1,200 patients with a healthy recall system. A solo doc is typically well served by 2 hygienists. So the math is pretty easy here. So uh, when you're consistently needing a doctor more than 3 to 4 columns, that's including all your hygiene exams, right? The hygiene is booked out for 6+ weeks. That's a signal. So those are the two things you want to look for. How far am I booked out with 3 to 4 columns of hygiene? Am I 6 months? Am I booked out for 6 weeks, not months? 6 weeks or more with 3 to 4 columns. The smart way to do it is to add that third hygienist, get that booked up. You'll start to feel the pressure. You're running around. We speak from experience here. You're going to start to hate those hygiene calls because you're going to be in the middle of a procedure and they're going to need you. And so you're going to be like, "Oh, I need to get an associate right now." Pump the brakes, take a look at the hard data before you do that, because you're going to start to feel the squeeze before you get the juice, right? So just understand that that's the way that this is going to roll out.
Yeah, and if you've never been in a practice with multiple hygienists by yourself, meaning more than two, it's just, you're treading water with two hygienists, and then you throw the third one in, and you start to drown, and it's makes that much of a difference. And so, it's you can only drown for so long, but that's a huge sign. If you're, like Dan said, if you're consistently needing, and a doctor in more than 3 or 4 columns, and hygiene is booked out 6+ weeks, that's a good sign. That's a really good sign. So at a minimum, 2+ hygienists, with plans to add more, ideally 3. Because if you bring an associate, think about what you're going to do. If you bring an associate too early, right, and there's not enough hygiene to support it, this is the like Dan said, this is the engine that runs production, because it's where you go and you diagnose. You're basically paying a second doctor to sit around in between sporadic new patient exams. That
Mhm.
gets expensive,
Mhm.
and it's not their fault. They're sitting around, they don't know what to do, and you're sitting around going, "Do something," but you're not providing them something to do, and so it's a very frustrating moment.
Yeah, that's the other side of that point I was making, is that either you give that associate all the work and then you take a pay cut, or you have a very upset. You're probably going to guarantee a minimum, right? So you're probably going to offer a minimum pay, and based on that, the expectation is that they're supposed to produce a certain amount. Well, if you are not feeding them that work, then that's exactly what you're going to end up with, is what Jared just said. You're going to have a doc sitting around doing sporadic exams, and you're going to be paying them a buttload of money to do that. Or, like I was saying earlier, on the flip side of it, you're going to be sitting around. The hygienist is, or the associate's going to be doing everything, and you're going to take a pay cut. So, if again, cart and horse.
Yeah. Let's dive a little bit deeper into those hygiene KPIs that will help you know if you're ready for an associate or to plan on getting ready for an associate because numbers, production and collections, you can have varying production collections. That's not really a measurement of KPI for whether to bring on an associate, but you can prep your hygiene department for bringing on an associate. And here's the KPIs you need to look at. What's your hygiene reappointment rate?
Yeah.
If you don't track this and you ask your hygienist, they're going to tell you we reappoint everybody. That's what they always say because they feel like they reappoint or they at least try. If you draw back the curtain and look at the numbers, if you're not tracking this on a consistent basis, this is probably closer to 70%, maybe lower. No, but many national databases and consultants consider 85 to 90 reappointment in hygiene as healthy. We look at 90 as a minimum. We are currently exiting Delta, and we still have a 90% reappointment rate. That's insane. So there's ways to bring this up and prepare yourself for an associate is to make sure that the people that are coming in the door are staying in your practice and not exiting out without a hygiene exam. So this is if your reappointment rate is below 80%, you have a recall problem. You got to fix this before adding a provider.
Yeah, you got a hole in the freaking boat is what you got, and you can't add more cargo when you're already sinking. It doesn't
Yes,
make
you've got this, and if you have any questions regarding this, we're happy to help show you this. If you've got any sort of system like dental intel, this is super easy to find and review on a consistent basis. So, your
yeah,
reappointment percentage and your hygiene. There's a couple other metrics you can use dental intel within the hygiene department to know if you are ready to bring on an associate. Your patients due versus your patients that are scheduled. Dan, you take a close look at this all the time and look at our outstanding patients that aren't scheduled. We have how many in the hopper that are just kind of waiting to be scheduled.
yeah, yeah. I think that you have to like. Um, I think that that's part of just good practice management is keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on with your recall. But certainly, one of the things I look at a lot is the lost patient base, right? So we've talked about lost patients before, what those are, but that's going to be a huge thing. Is you want to go back and see if your lost patient base is growing. That's a concern, and you've got to stop. You got to plug up that hole before you can move forward with an associate. And there's some easy things you can do, like Jared said. Um, we've been beating the drum on the reappointment percentage and hygiene, but you also want to look at your patients due versus the ones that are scheduled, right? That's really easy with data analytics. And then look at your past due recall. So are those like legitimately lost patients? Where are they? Have they transferred? Are they just not rescheduled? Did they move? Have they passed away? What's happened there, right? But the bottom line is if your reappointment rate is in that 65 to 75% area, or like you said, Jared, below 80%, um, you don't have an associate problem. You've got a retention problem. So that's a different podcast, one we've done in the past. We won't rehash that. But an associate will absolutely magnify whatever system you already have. If it's leaking, like I said, if you got a hole in the boat and you add more cargo, you're just going to sink faster.
Yeah, this is yeah, I like how you said that. Like bringing on an associate will always magnify whatever system you already have. I think that's what you said.
Yeah, if you
Um,
have a problem, it's going to make it worse. If you have something good, it'll produce more. So if you have, and that's why it's so important to get your systems and operations, have all your processes and protocols written up prior to bring in an associate. So we were talking about this the other day in a mastermind group that we do with the dentist advisors, and we were talking about goal setting. It's the end of the year right now, and so we were talking about goal setting for the new year, and we were talking about meetings. and optimization and systems. And it was interesting that how many docs don't have any standardized systems. And one of the things that leads to employee dissatisfaction, it's one of the primary drivers of employee dissatisfaction, is not knowing how they're performing. So if you don't do reviews, right? It's not knowing how they're performing, and it's not knowing what their expectations are. So if you don't have those outlined, if you don't have clear expectations, you don't have performance reviews or some way to track someone's performance. If you're not reviewing that at least on a monthly basis, you're going to find that there's some discord amongst your employees, right? So, but I mean, that's just the bare minimum. You really should have your processes and protocols for everything lined out. So when you have an associate come on, the assistants know what's expected of them. They know how to do things. There's not going to be a question. And I get it because associates will come in with their own, depending on, how long they've been practicing, what school they went to, if they did, who they studied under or whatever. Every doc's got their own preferences, right? Nobody does the same thing the same way. Um, and so that's not what I'm talking about. I don't think it's healthy to bring an associate in and expect them to conform exactly to the way that you do all of your procedures, as long as they get a good outcome. If they have a system that works, it gets the same outcome, the same expected outcome, the same good outcome, then you're fine. Now, if you've got someone, and we'll get into this later, but if you've got someone that doesn't perform to the level that you expect out of your office, that's a different story. But what I'm talking about is the actual systems, processes, and protocols that go for, you know, um, everything from the patient walking into the door, everything that happens in between that time and walking them out. How does that look? What does that patient experience look like? What are the expectations of the assistants? What are the expectations of the hygienist? What are the expectations of the front desk? And what are the expectations of the associate? If you hire some dinkalink that comes in as a jerk to all your patients and nobody bothers to like say anything or do anything, you're going to have frustrated assistants, you're going to have frustrated patients, frustrated hygienists, and you may not know because they might Eddie Haskell you and be totally nice to your face, but be a total jerk at other places. So there's things that have to be considered, right? There's a lot that goes into this, but the bottom line is get optimized, get your systems and protocols in place.
Yes, which is our next podcast. We're going to dive deeper into the systems and protocols, and I'm excited to do that because that's going to be probably a longer podcast because there's so many things we're planning on going over in that podcast.
Yeah.
Earlier, briefly touched on the production collection benchmarks because it varies wildly amongst producer. It depends on it depends on what procedures you're doing. It depends on if you are kind of what is quote unquote a bread and butter doctor, or if you're doing more specialized procedures, implants, ortho, clear aligners, whatever it may be. But we'll give you some general numbers for some production and collection benchmarks that can help you consider whether bringing on an associate or not. So typically, you have a capacity as a solo practitioner, as a provider, as a doctor. If you're not killing yourself, you're probably you're producing, not earning, I'm sorry, but you're probably producing somewhere between 900 and what, 1.2 or 1.3 million in production per year. So if that's you, unless you're doing a lot of high-end procedures, you're probably not going to be able to do a lot more by yourself, right? I mean, with some issues, there's always caveats. I guess with some healthy, maybe you can do 1.5 with some strong systems, expanded hours, maybe if you're working longer, or like
High
I
dollar
said,
procedures. Yeah.
yeah, some advanced procedures. But generally, I would probably say if you're between the 900 for the average listener, 900 and 1.2 million, you're pretty maxed out in your capacity to produce. You know, um, if you're so that's just production, right? That's not taking into
That's just production.
consideration
Yeah.
adjustments, write-offs, insurance. We're not going to dive quite into that yet, but
Gross production, by the way.
gross production, right? This is just what you're producing, what's coming in your, and then if another KPI for you and your production is you look at how far booked out you are. If you are 2 weeks booked out, that's not very much. and it's not enough to bring an associate on. But if you're 4 to 6 weeks, 6 weeks, I would say maybe 2 months booked out, you yourself, that's a good sign or a green light as far as maybe I'd consider now an associate to come in and help to offload a lot of that work.
Yeah. One of the things I want you to talk, we touched on it a little bit just a minute ago, Jared. What does it, what does running a practice when you're at that level, like when you are, you're booked out for 6+ weeks, right? In your restorative schedule, never mind hygiene. We talked about being booked out in hygiene 6 weeks. You're booked out 6 weeks plus in your restorative schedule. You've got 3 hygienists, 4 hygienists, you're by yourself. You're starting to feel the pressure. What are the side effects of all of that? We're going to get into the psychological stuff beyond with all of this. Like, are you psychologically ready? But this isn't part of that conversation. So I want to just say, what's the pep talk you would give to somebody that's going to do this? You've done this a couple times now. And what's the pep talk that you give to a doc that's like, yeah, I want to bring on an associate?
I would say first this, as far as if you're booked out 4 to 6 weeks in your schedule, that's not good. That's not good for your patient base because you cannot treat patients as they need to be treated. In my opinion, this is one of those arbitrary measures of outside of success that we pin a badge on our chest and love to tell people how far booked out we are. Oh, I'm booked out months.
Right. What a,
I
what a weird badge of honor.
But it's true, but it's like we're so good. People want me so much that I'm booked out. Well, what happens if you have a patient who's been a patient of yours for 10 years, 12 years, and they need to get in? If you're booked out that far, then you're coming in on extra after hours or extra days you don't want to work, and it's not healthy for you or for your practice. It really isn't. So, 4 weeks is okay, 6 weeks, but you really need to consider that, and need to consider, look, how can I best serve my patients? I've got 2,000s, 2,500, 3,000 patients, whatever. Is it good for me to be booked out 6 weeks? My argument is no.
Yeah.
I really don't think so. It feels good, and it feels great to be look at the schedule and be like, yeah, it makes you feel awesome. It really does. It makes it hits a
It's
chord of
comfortable. It's comfortable because you're like, oh, I got this huge cushion.
totally, and it hits it, yes, and then it hits an ego core too. People like me, right?
Yeah.
That frail elderly people like me. They're going to come in and get their stuff done. When in actuality, the only reason why they're coming in is because it's beginning of December. They have to use their benefits before the end of the year. They don't care about you, right? And on an insurance driven practice. But the yeah, so but if you're booked out that far, consider bringing in a quality and associate, somebody who can treat your patients, and that's another good green light for you to consider. If you're struggling to fill the schedule, you're a week and a half out, you're probably not ready.
Definitely not. And I think to attach to your point, Jared, if you're under $750,000 in doc production, right, and you're not growing, the problem likely isn't enough doctor capacity. It's more than likely it's case acceptance. It's probably you've got some marketing problems. And again, we go back to this thing of systems, and we'll talk about more on that in the third part of this podcast series. Um, but I think that if you have a one of the things that we kind of touched on was overhead, and I want to jump into that a little bit because this is the other thing. Like, your practice might support the production end of things, but bringing an associate will absolutely affect your overhead, and in more ways than most people realize. You can bring on an associate that is a baller and is a good producer, and you may not ever feel that overhead impact. But for a lot of situations, especially for offices that hire new grads, someone that hasn't been really well trained, and you are trying to train them up, you're going to see your overhead take a jump. because your production is going to take a dip. Your overall production per doc is going to take a dip. And you just prepare for that. We've talked about that multiple times now, different scenarios, but overhead is something that you cannot ignore. And so we really need to take a look at what does it actually cost to support an associate, right?
Yeah, people who aren't ready and bring on an associate too early often feel like their associate is making more money than they are,
Mm.
and they often are. You're not wrong.
Because they
Like,
are.
they are, yeah, because there's so much that goes into paying an associate. We often get stuck in the one category of compensation, right? Which is, typically speaking, nationwide, you're going to pay anywhere between 30 to 35% of collections. Generally speaking, I mean, I've heard as low as like 28% or 27%. I don't know that I've ever heard higher than 35%, but um, it varies by your region, and other factors that we're going to get into. But generally speaking, 30, 35%. So you think to yourself, oh, hey, that means that leaves 70, 65% of profit for me, right, Dan? Is that how it works?
No, uh, not even close. So I actually was trying to build a calculator at one point, an associate calculator that brought in all of the overhead costs. The problem is that it varies so much per associate based on what they can produce. So, if you bring on an associate that, like I said, has a high capacity, is fast, well trained, is versed in multiple procedures, this totally changes this whole thing. But you still have to take into account these basic overhead KPIs, right? So Jared just talked about compensation. The other ones you got to look at is what about employer taxes and benefits, right? So you're going to add payroll taxes because you're not just adding the associate, you're probably adding at least one other assistant. Like we talked about, 1 to 2 more hygienists. Can your front desk support all this now? Can you have one person up front to walk all these people out, reschedule them? What about your sterilization? Sterilization is going to be freaking jamming. That's one of the things that in our office, we run a big office. Sterilization is always getting turned over. It's a constant thing, right? So, do you have to hire maybe a hygiene assistant? Do you need what you have to take into account these peripheral expenses that come with just bringing on one more doc, right?
Yeah, I
So,
mean, you dive just simply into just even like the taxes associated with just the one doctor that you're going to bring on, right? You
yep,
mentioned it earlier, your payroll tax alone. Guess what? That's going to go up. You're going to pay, it's thousands of dollars a year more than what you would expect. Trust me.
yep.
Are, are you going to offer health benefits? That's huge as well, right? So, that's almost a universal thing that's offered now. How about CE? Are you going to pay for their CE? Especially if you've got a young guy coming out of school and you're offering to kind of mentor him. He's going to want to do CE. He's going to want travel expenses. He's going to want you to pay for the course. He's going to come home with ideas. He's going to want to purchase new equipment based upon the CE. That gets expensive over a year's period. How you're going to offer probably to pay for their licensure, right? And then how about their insurance, or just their malpractice insurance, right? You're going to be paying all of those things: payroll taxes, health benefits, CE, licensure. That's just taxes and benefits that you're paying. So yes, you're paying him 30 to 35% of collections, but add on 2 to 5% of your effective costs. So now your associate's costing you anywhere between 32 and 37% just for just adding on taxes and benefits. So
Yeah. And
that's
and
that's
and
the next step.
and I think that there's probably someone out there who's going like, "Oh, I don't need to offer that." They can pay for their own CE, they can pay for their own malpractice insurance, whatever. Well, guess what? You're competing now. This is one of the ways that DSOs have changed the game. And a DSO is offering a signing bonus. They're offering to cover all of the health insurance. They've got a competitive health insurance package. If they're going to pay for not a little bit of CE, a butt ton of CE. So they want their docs trained. They want them producing. And really, you should too. If you're going to bring an associate on, you want them well trained. So if they're like Jared was saying, if they're a newer doc, you want he or she to be out there jamming on CE to get ready. Matter of fact, we built in our office, we actually have a whole uh, associate training program that we run through our office. And it is so CE heavy for the first 2 years because we want our docs to be proficient and producing. But that costs money up front. Again, you're going to see the impact. It's going to hurt financially in the beginning unless you have someone, a doc that is very, very experienced coming in and can just hit the ground running. So,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, like you said, I mean, now we've gone, what did you say from now we've gone from 30 to 35% compensation, more to 32 to 37, maybe upwards towards 40% compensation. Well, gosh, that's getting expensive, right?
Yeah.
And
Then
then you have to add in the clinical overhead. What
yeah.
about your supplies, right? So now this becomes a big deal. This is why we are huge with working with dental supply organizations like Best for Dentistry. So to bring down, so for us, we're big for a single office, but compared to a DSO or a corporate office, we're tiny, but we need that competitive pricing on our supplies. So we sign up with a company like Best for Dentistries to bring that cost down. You've got your labs are going to be more. I would highly recommend if you're heavy in Crown and Bridge that you look into getting a Zurich. If there's two docs, I personally, I think you're crazy if you don't do it, if you're heavy on Crown and Bridge. What about just your equipment? You know, maybe that sometimes you need a tax break. So equipment's not always a bad thing to have to go and buy more. But you're gonna have instruments, all this other stuff, right?
Yeah. You've got assistant, yeah, like I said, assistants. So numerically speaking, speaking of KPIs and numbers, so if it's a lab, if you end up paying the lab, with the young guy, there's going to be some redos as well, which is going to add up a little bit. But so you could see anywhere between a 3 to 10% more increase in overhead, right? Depending on the procedure mix of what they do. So now you're 40 plus for sure, 45, maybe 50% of what that is. Then so that's just the clinical overhead. You've got a facility overhead, right? Which is, do you have enough ops to support an associate doctor? And are you going to offer expanded hours? If you're thinking to yourself, I'm just going to work mine, my associate's going to work in the evenings, guess what? You're going to be paying for a front desk, you're paying for an assistant, you're paying for whoever else during those expanded hours, which can get costly as well. You've got admin, you've got front desk. You mentioned that to take on the increased capacity. So you've got this facility overhead, and then the big one, Dan, in my opinion, is the leadership, the time overhead, the time that you spend mentoring your associate, whether it
Mhm.
be a young guy or whether it be somebody else that you're just bringing on, somebody to mentor him into the ways that you run your practice. And I don't know how to put a number on this one. I don't think you can put a KPI numerical number on this one, but you're spending time checking work. You're having them take X-rays, post-op X-rays, so you can check that. You're sitting down with them on a daily basis. You're managing a relationship between them, between the staff, between the team, between the patients. Yeah, this one takes a ton of time and effort that you can't really say how much it costs.
And this is why we want to get into, and again, in the third part of our podcast series, we're going to get into the psychological aspect because if you're burning out because your patient load is high and your hours are long, and you're mentally taxed and you just don't have much bandwidth left, you're like, oh, I need an associate. You may want to consider getting someone that's experienced. The problem that comes with an experienced doc is they're going to be very used to um, their way of doing things. So you have to be flexible. I don't want to get too much into the psychological stuff, but there's some things to consider when we talk about overhead. Like there's a psychological or a mental overhead, like Jared was just saying, that is, I think, more than people. They think that bringing someone on is just going to be this huge relief. It doesn't work that way. Your problems just change. So you'll solve the problem of being able to treat all the patients. You will see an increase in production. Yes, you'll see your KPIs. If you're optimized, you'll see your KPIs improve. The practice should be more successful. However, your headaches are going to be different. And I like that you touched on the fact that if you're bringing someone up anew, maybe that is something like I love mentoring. That's one of the things that fills my battery. It doesn't drain for me. So bringing someone in that needs mentoring for me is, I love it. It doesn't deplete my bandwidth. It adds to it. But you may not be that way. Maybe you're a doc that you're like, oh, I freaking this doc is bugging me again for, to check the margins or to look at the, the polish or, whatever. So just know that you're going to be pulled in an additional direction, probably either way. And you don't really know if they're not vetted. Do you really know what kind of work you're going to get? And also, Jared, I wanted to touch on, we get this question fairly often and you'll see it on forums all the time is, do you make your associates pay for their lab work? Right? Like that's an old school thing. DSOs typically don't do that. There's a few that do, but typically they don't. So just plan on paying that as well when we were talking about, the actual cost of overhead. So yeah, there's a lot of overhead that you're going to see increase, and just be ready for that. It's not that you can't handle it. You can easily handle it. But again, I think this goes back, we don't, I'm going to touch on the systems things for just a second, but you need to understand your role as a leader. Where do your strengths lie? Are you an integrator or are you a visionary? We talked about this so much, right, Jared? But if you don't understand your role going into this is going to be a problem. If you're a visionary and you don't have a good integrator, oh my gosh, bringing an associate in is going to drive you crazy because you're going to have all these ideas. You're going to have all these like plans. Things are going to be like, oh, and you have it in your mind how how it's going to turn out. Guess what? It's not going to turn out the way you thought if you don't have an integrator. So, hop on our website, guys. This is an easy thing to do. There is no strings attached. Get on there, take the integrator visionary quiz before you go into this and find out what you are, right? And we'll touch on this again, but I just wanted to hit it, and I'll probably hit it on all three sessions that we do, but just such a huge thing is know your role. And if you don't, you're going to struggle by adding an associate.
Yeah, at the end of the day, if you put together your spreadsheet and you go through these KPIs and these numbers, and it only works if everything goes perfectly and
Yeah.
your margin is like razor thin, you're not ready. Right? I promise you, you're going to hit bumps in the road, and you're going to have some months where you don't, maybe you don't make as much money, or maybe you don't make anything that month. To be honest, as the owner, you have to be prepared for some of those bumps that come up. And so, as a good general rule, you want your associate production to yield at least 10 to 20% profit margin. And
And
again,
that's beyond their compensation, right,
yeah,
Jared? Is that in
right.
addition? Yeah.
Yeah. So, if you have questions, so a good way to do this, to build this out, and we walk in at EA, we often walk members through a simple like P&L scenario where what does 800,000 or 1 million or 1.2 million associate look like, after their compensation and their overhead. And so that way you can know going into it, yes, this is going to work for me, or I feel comfortable with this margin, or this profit margin. And then, but before you do that, listen to the next two episodes that we've got lined up, just to make sure that one, your systems and protocols are ready, and two, you're psychologically ready, because the numbers may tell you one thing. You kind of got to be ready in all three fronts. So looking forward to those episodes.
Judas, Jared, I almost forgot. This is huge. I don't know how I didn't think of this until just now. Get a freaking growth report. Like, oh my gosh, do not even start down this trail until you have a growth report. It's I've had so many conversations with docs where I ask for some simple KPIs. What's your reappointment percentage? How many active patients do you have? You know, what's your attrition rate? Oh, my office manager knows all that. Uh-huh. Okay. So, and I'll have a standing bet, and if anyone wants to hit me up on this, I'll take it. Is that if they don't have an analytics software, if they don't have a consultant on that they're working with, that I will still put $20 on the line. If we were to call your office manager during normal office hours and ask for some simple KPIs, they wouldn't be able to get them. And you don't know where you're sitting right now. And that sounds super like kind of jerky, but it's just that's how strongly I feel about it, is that I'm willing to go into being a jerk about it in hopes that someone will be like, yeah, I need to freaking get my data in line and get it to where I can have it functionally available to me anytime, or my office manager anytime. I don't think I don't think it's important that the doc knows that off the top of their head. It just needs to be accessible to them so they can find it quickly. And the easiest way to do that on a nice, easy to read spreadsheet is a growth report, right? So we offer that as well. Hop on our website. Again, it's a free growth report. We're not we'll review it with you. There's no strings attached. The only thing is we'll go through it with you so you can understand what all the data points mean. But if we can't have a conversation about, are you ready for an associate, looking at the KPIs and the numbers without you having a baseline. You've got to have that baseline. So get a growth report. Please, if you don't get it from us, get it from somewhere else, but get a growth report.
Yep, and that's a great place to start. So feel free to reach out to us if you want some help with the growth report or KPIs or numbers or P&L review, and we'd be happy to go over any of that with you. We have Ryan, who's our wizard, with the data and the data analytics and numbers, and we can at least just give you uh, um, uh, an idea of what we're thinking, of what we're seeing, and then you can take it and run with there. But it is, like Dan was saying, it is your responsibility as an owner of a business. If you're the owner of a business, you need to understand the numbers, and you may not like it, and you may have money in your account, and it may not hurt real bad, but you could do so many more things for yourself, for your team, for your patients, if you really understood where your practice is and where your potential is. So, and it gives you a peace of mind. So,
Totally. So
thanks
what,
for listening.
oh, I cut you off again, Jared. Sorry. Yeah, no, yeah, like Jared said, thanks for listening. If you have questions about any of this stuff, we're here to help. This is why we exist. I say it all the time. We don't have to do this. We do it because we love it. So we love to collaborate with other docs. So reach out to us if you have questions. If you think you're ready for an associate, you want to go over some KPIs, you need a growth report, all that stuff. Let's chat. Just email us. We'd be happy to talk over text, whatever you want to do. I'm excited, Jared, to go over these other two things, man. So what Jared hasn't told you is he's jet setting, man. He's taken off to Asia. He's going to go do a Asian holiday. Lucky sucker.
Yeah, my brother lives over in Korea. We're gonna go spend some time over there and head down to Southeast Asia. So we will resume this when I get back in a couple weeks.
Yep. So we're going to have a little hiatus before the part 2 comes out, but hang tight for that, and we'll get it out as soon as Jared gets back from having all the fun. Don't take all the fun with you. Leave a little bit here for us, would you?
We'll see.
All right. Okay. Sounds good. We'll see you guys next time.
See ya.